Everything begins in a dungeon where a monster that looks like a rabbit attacks a boy, but ends up being easily defeated by his sword. Two other rabbits attack as well, but they're also taken down without difficulty. After making these movements, the human realizes that maybe he isn't as out of shape as he thought, and that he can still manage as a swordsman. When 5 goblins appear before him, the boy sees that it's time to test his support spells, so he casts Strength Increase, an ability capable of buffing his physical attributes or strengthening his equipment. According to the man, every adventuring group needs at least one member capable of using this type of technique, because it's very important to have someone who can raise the attack and defense of the whole team. By the way, by using this magic, he manages to defeat all the enemies one by one without taking any damage. However, even though he praises the qualities of this kind of enchantment, he admits that it has one central weakness: time. After 3 minutes of fighting, the enchantment ends, and when more goblins start appearing in the dungeon, he has to repeat the same ability to stay ahead in the battle. While he destroys his new opponents, the human thinks about how an individual's resistance to magic affects the duration of their enchantment. In his case, it's only 3 minutes, and sadly that forces him to constantly watch the time so he can reactivate the spell whenever it ends, making enchanters like him always fight an endless battle against the clock. The boy is able to handle a sword, which isn't common for someone of his class, but this limitation is still a weakness. And speaking of weaknesses, that's exactly why the young man was kicked out of his adventuring group without ceremony by its leader, Oliver. Remembering that day with anger, the enchanter argued that the two of them were childhood friends who had always fought together. But Oliver confessed that during all that time, he only gave Orhan a few chances because they came from the same village, and that from now on, they would go their separate ways. Annalie and Derek, the other 2 members of the team, were more direct in making it clear that Orhan was only slowing everyone down, so Oliver threw in the towel and admitted that he was expelling his childhood friend because he wasn't strong enough. Unable to believe what he was hearing, Orhan remembered how he formed that team with Oliver 8 years ago, and how they reached S rank in a short time, becoming the first group to reach the 94th floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth, so much so that, because of that feat, they started being called the Heroes Party. With that memory in mind, Orhan acknowledged that maybe he wasn't strong enough. But if he wasn't, then no one in the group was. Oliver interrupted his friend to emphasize that they hadn't really understood the importance of an enchanter to the team until that joint attack last month, when they saw how incredible the enchanters from the other S-rank groups were, while Orhan was weak. Orhan admitted he wasn't that good because his real profession was swordsman. But even then, he developed his own original magic, not wanting to hear excuses. Derek and Annalie cut him off aggressively and reminded him that he only changed professions because he was worse than Oliver with a sword. But even in his new class, he didn't stand out. In response, Orhan argued that he only became an enchanter because the group needed one, and because he was the one with the most aptitude for it, pushing himself to the point of developing his own magic to compensate for his weaknesses, ensuring the group survived the deeper floors of the dungeons because of that. Once again, the boy was interrupted, this time by Oliver, who made it clear that they already had a replacement enchanter. This news shook the expelled member deeply, while Annalie commented without the slightest remorse that they were the Heroes Party and couldn't be slowed down by someone who couldn't keep up with the rest of the group. Understanding once and for all that there was no place for him anymore, even though he couldn't believe he had been thrown away like that after everything they had been through together, Orhan headed toward the exit, heartbroken. The mage also pointed out that he was able to use some magic and a sword, but everything at a rank, and even so he kept trying to tell everyone what to do, which was quite irritating. According to the girl, people like Orhan are called Jack of all trades, a way to belittle those who only serve to fill in gaps and aren't that important. Filled with hatred over the way he was expelled from his team, Orhan can't swallow being called something like that, a Jack of all trades. Even so, he didn't leave the group empty-handed, since through his own effort, he figured out a way to combine his 2 professions, swordsman and enchanter, becoming an adaptable enough adventurer to make this fusion work effectively. With this technique he acquired, Orhan hopes never again to be called a Jack of all trades, and that one day he'll be an adventurer capable of doing anything. After finishing his expedition in the dungeon, the boy registers the teleport crystal so he can return directly to the 7th floor next time. However, when he's about to leave, he runs into a group of adventurers who had to flee from a horde of orcs and were forced to leave a little girl behind. Because if they had stayed, the leader explains, everyone would have been killed. and he decided to prioritize his older companions. Orhan can't help but worry when he hears that, but he tries not to get involved in the problem, convincing himself that the girl was just unlucky to have joined the wrong group. However, he knows very well the pain of being abandoned by your team, and knowing that makes Orhan turn back and decide to intervene. Taken by indignation, he accuses the group of abandoning a teammate and then making excuses so they wouldn't have to save her, the kind of people who irritate the enchanter the most. One of the members responds that he wouldn't have been able to save the girl even if he had stayed behind. And since he's not the type to swallow an insult, he tries to punch Orhan, who easily counters and throws the kid to the ground. Quickly, Orhan asks where the girl was left. Speaking of her, the poor young girl was surrounded by orcs and on the verge of being devoured alive. In a desperate move, she plays her last card by invoking a magical shield to keep the monsters from getting closer, while they tried to break through the barrier and she screamed for her older sister. Suddenly, just as the defense shatters, Orhan arrives, unleashing an arrow shock and driving the enemies back. They immediately start attacking the man instead. As always, Orhan prepares his sword and buffs himself with strength, boost his main battle combination, then engages the orcs in close combat. He also activates technique boost to face opponents of that caliber, which makes the girl confused about this man's profession, since he seems to be both an enchanter and a swordsman at the same time. After defeating some of the orcs, the human casts sharpness boost to make his blade even more capable of tearing through the enemy's flesh. When he returns to the fight, the girl is impressed, having never seen anyone fight like that. Facing this horde, Orhan understands why that low-ranked group ended up running away. But he, on the other hand, knows he can handle this on his own. With that in mind, the swordsman heads into the center of the chaos and performs a series of strikes that shred a large portion of the monsters. Then, he displays technique and speed as he beheads his opponents with extraordinary ease, leaving the little girl more and more astonished by the extent of his talent. Soon enough, when the enchanter finishes off all the orcs, the girl collapses onto the ground in relief and starts crying. After getting the girl safely out of the dungeon, Orhan was simply saying goodbye, not expecting much, but eager to thank him properly for the help he gave. The girl says she is eternally grateful and introduces herself as Sophia Claudel. Hearing her last name, the swordsman finally notices the crest on her tunic, then introduces himself in return as Orhan Dura, a name Sophia really liked. Wanting to make up for the trouble she caused, the girl offers to pay for the boy's dinner. And although he says he didn't help her expecting anything in return, she is so intent on rewarding him somehow that he ends up accepting the invitation, even if a bit awkwardly. So she takes the enchanter to a restaurant whose sign carries the same crest as her clothing. According to the girl, it's a very cheap place, but the food is great. This confirms for Orhan that Sophia Claudel is indeed part of the Silver Rabbits of the Night Sky, one of the biggest and most popular clans in the kingdom of Nohitn. Once inside, Sophia is startled to see her older sister in the establishment, and she explains that she's there for a meeting nearby. She asks who the boy with her sister is, saying Sophia is far too young to be dating. Embarrassed, Sophia panics and can't explain what's going on, until her older sister finally realizes she is standing before Orhan Dura. Scratching his head, Orhan says, "Long time no see, Selma Claudel." Sophia doesn't understand how this guy knows her sister, so he explains that Selma is the leader of the Silver Rabbit's most powerful S-rank, simply the strongest enchanter in the kingdom, largely responsible for making the enchanter profession well known, as well as creating the idea of group members having different roles. In the strategy she created, each team is divided into 3 functions: attackers, who take down the enemy; defenders, who act as shields; and supporters, who provide assistance. This strategy revolutionized the way adventurers carry out their missions, forever changing dungeon expeditions. According to Orhan, the hero's party is no different, and that's why he had to abandon his swordsman profession to become an enchanter. After seeing how strong Selma was in last month's joint assault, that's when his teammates decided Orhan wasn't good enough, which eventually resulted in his expulsion. Thinking to himself, he had already suspected the 2 girls were from the same clan, but had no idea they were sisters. Speaking of that, wearing an angry expression, Selma asks what this brat is doing around her 14-year-old little sister. Not knowing how to explain it properly, Orhan says he really was going to have dinner with Sophia, but that his intentions are pure, interpreting that as him saying her sister isn't good enough for him. Selma loses her temper and starts to raise her voice, so Sophia steps in to calm her down and explains that this man was the one who saved her life. Disappointed that Sophia went into the dungeon alone and without informing the clan, Selma reminds her that the day after tomorrow they were supposed to go together to the Great Labyrinth, and that the younger girl should never have done that. Since she's unharmed, the older sister isn't going to scold her, but insists she never repeat that behavior. Because Orhan saved her sister, Selma thanks him and apologizes for her harshness. Then the three sit together more calmly, and Selma mentions she hasn't seen Orhan since that joint assault last month when they met, and that this is the first time the two have talked like this. Since they're in the same class, they were placed together in that battle, where Selma took command and Orhan served as support. Selma praises the boy's performance that day, and Sophia comments that it sounds like her sister has known this guy for a long time. Selma is surprised that the younger girl had never heard of Orhan Dura, since he is a member of the Heroes Party. The girl is shocked to learn how important he is, but Orhan says he no longer belongs to that team, without revealing the exact reason. Hearing that, Selma asks if he is free, thinking she is about to recruit him for the Silver Rabbits. Orhan doesn't even let the girl finish and declines the invitation immediately, because he wants to stay without a group for a while. Selma explains that the young man misunderstood the situation. In reality, she has the perfect job for the swordsman, accompanying her clan on the training expedition that will begin the day after tomorrow. This expedition is meant to recruit new members, where A rank and S rank veterans will lead these new recruits for 3 days as they descend to the 50th floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. Impressed that this would take only 3 days, Orhan comments that the best novice adventurers would take 6 months to a year to do the same. Selma then explains that it's possible if they take the shortest route. She also admits that the expedition sponsors are demanding quick results. Orhan points out that even the Silver Rabbits have their own problems, but he still doesn't understand why the sponsors are pressuring the clan so much, even after such a bold promise regarding the expedition. Either way, since she's determined to move forward with this mission, the swordsman thinks that if the goal is to strengthen the clan as a whole, then the novices who wouldn't be able to defeat the floor boss could explore the deeper levels on their own. Selma is impressed that he figured that out based solely on the little she said, which means he's sharper than she thought. In labyrinths, adventurers must defeat the bosses that appear every 10 floors in order to keep descending, and it's very common for recruits to die in fights of that level. But if the more experienced adventurers handle those battles, the novices can simply register at the crystal and proceed to the next floor. In fact, that's why the leader wants Orhan Dura to join this expedition. He asks if it's really okay for someone from the outside to be part of it. At that moment, the woman holds his hands, making him flustered, and emphasizes how much she respects him as an enchanter. The boy is glad to hear that, but it also reminds him of the reason he was expelled from the Heroes Party, not being as strong as Selma during their combined attack. And now she's asking him to return to being an enchanter, which doesn't sound very appealing considering the recent trauma he went through. Because of that, Dura ends up refusing the invitation. But Sophia says she's going as well and insists that he join them, shaking him a little. He promises to think about it more, but emphasizes that he abandoned the enchanter profession to focus on being a swordsman, and if he's going to take part in this mission, it will be in that role. Even though she's surprised, Selma accepts his condition, because deep down she believes that if things get heated inside the labyrinth, Orhan Dura will return to being an enchanter to deal with the situation. Either way, if he decides to participate, he must go to the Silver Rabbits headquarters tomorrow morning. At nightfall, Orhan goes to the shop of an old man who, despite being close to closing, welcomes the boy warmly and offers him tea. After all, he feels enormous gratitude for all the promotion the boy gave the shop when he became a member of the Heroes Party, which boosted sales. Speaking of that, the boy apologizes to his grandfather before revealing that he's no longer part of the group. Even so, the elderly man says his gratitude for his grandson will never diminish, and that Orhan is still himself with or without that team. He knows very well how hard the boy worked to help, and that will never be forgotten. In the old man's opinion, people like his grandson are essential for society, and seeing how the boy struggles to accept compliments, he urges Orhan to receive such words of affection better whenever he hears them. Trusting his grandson's intuition and character, the grandfather asks him to do what he believes is right, because his journey is long and only just beginning. Therefore, Orhan should live for himself, but never stop helping others. Whatever happens, his grandfather will always be by his side. The next morning, Orhan Dura reports to the Silver Rabbits HQ. Seeing that he looks well, Selma asks if he feels relieved to have left the Heroes Party, and he answers that it's something like that. Next, Vince Brawers, the clan leader, thanks the young man for coming and admits he has heard quite a lot about him, including the unfortunate part about him leaving the hero's party. As for Orhan, he doesn't go into that subject and instead wants to know more about this teaching expedition. Selma then reminds him that in 3 days they'll be heading to the 51st floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. Before reaching that level, they'll stop on the 21st floor on the first day, the 36th on the second day, and so on. In the middle of that explanation, we see an earlier moment when Selma told the leader of the rabbits about Orhan Dura's departure from the hero's party, and how she saw it as a terrible loss for the team, since they certainly wouldn't be as strong without Dura. Selma agreed, because the enchanter raised the team to another level with his support magic. Sure, Orhan's spells were less potent than average, but his enchantment speed was impressive 4 times faster than hers. On top of that, Selma had seen Orhan use original spells, and she noticed that he had great ability to analyze situations, predict the next move, and provide magical support at the right moment. He had every skill an enchanter needs. With his absence in the hero's party, Selma believed the Silver Rabbits would return to the top very soon. Hearing about that boy during the joint attack, Vince found it hard to believe that Orhan Dura had been discarded like that. But his subordinate explained that enchanters usually don't get the credit they deserve. She herself, because she's famous, ends up being overrated, while the truly powerful ones, like Orhan, are usually treated as if they're nothing. Returning to the present moment, after hearing all the details of the expedition, Orhan goes over the plan. There will be 10 groups of rookies and 5 escorts, including him and Selma. The rookies groups will take turns dealing with the monsters, and if something unusual happens, the escorts are the ones who must handle it. By the way, Orhan asks why only 5 escorts instead of more rank groups, since it would make sense to minimize the risks of the expedition, especially given how tight the schedule is and how it could put the beginners in danger. Selma answers that they really do want to take the rookies to the 51st floor, but that they need to go through some difficulty in order to truly grow during this mission. Orhan knows that isn't the real reason, though he has no idea what the real one is, and of course they wouldn't tell an outsider like him. Regardless, he offers his help and receives Vince Brawers' thanks. According to him, the enchanter's reward will be 2 gold coins now, and 10 more if the mission succeeds. Orhan thinks that's great, although he admits he found the payment excessive, since it's enough to cover a full year of expenses for an ordinary citizen. Selma points out that this is the value they see in him, so he promises to do his best. Hours later, Orhan Dura heads to the dungeon entrance where the excursion will take place, and the rookies are gathered, preparing for the start of the journey. When Selma and Sophia appear and greet him, he notices that the little girl's outfit is the same as before, probably the standard uniform for beginners. He also says she looks great in that outfit, making Sophia blush as she thanks him. While Selma can't handle the face her sister makes and sarcastically points out how well Orhan knows how to compliment a lady. Since they're already talking about knowing how to charm someone, Selma asks if the guy has a girlfriend. He scratches his head and says no. But since there were women on his old team, he probably learned how to deal with the opposite sex. Selma remembers that the hero's party used to live together in the same mansion, while Sophia asks where her friend is living now. He explains that he's living at an inn. Selma panics, trying to understand why her sister would want to know that, since it sounds like she might be planning to visit him. And the poor girl has to scramble to explain that she was just curious, changing the subject. Selma asks why Orhan is staying farther away from the rookies, and he explains that since he's an outsider, he chose to give them some distance to make the beginners even more anxious. Speaking of that, the enchanter asks him to help calm the group down, while she asks Sophia to go meet her team. Soon after, Orhan accompanies Selma as she approaches a trio of adventurers who will serve as escorts. The Silver Rabbit praises Orhan Dura and assures them he will be a great companion, and everyone believes it when such an important member of the group says that. Orhan, on the other hand, asks her not to put such high expectations on him, especially in front of the others. Finally, after Orhan says he's an attacker, the blue-haired man introduces himself as Anthem, a defender. Bernard, the other guy, is also a defender, while Kathy is the healer. Orhan thinks the group is well balanced, but if he hadn't come, someone would have had to make do as the attacker, and that makes the boy even more suspicious about this plan. Seeing the boy's reactions, Selma once again remembers that conversation she had with her leader. Vince said he understood how she felt for having lost such a powerful trump card, but reminded her that Orhan is an enchanter just like her. and thinking about the group's balance, he couldn't remain in the first squad. Even though she agreed, Selma lamented that her clan hadn't moved forward even a single step since last year, making her believe the Silver Rabbits wouldn't be able to regain what they had lost, and it was exactly for that reason that she invited Orhan Dura to participate in the expedition. Still, he only agreed to come if he were used as a swordsman, and all she hopes is that he truly works as a frontline attacker when things start getting intense. Finally, after saying goodbye to the escort group, Selma takes Orhan to the rookies to welcome them. Moving to the front and receiving everyone's full attention, the leader announces that today they will begin their descent toward the 51st floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. She understands the young one's nervousness, since it's not easy to reach such a deep level of this dungeon so early in their careers, but she asks them not to worry, as she brought a powerful companion in case something outside the plan happens. In that case, she introduces Orhan Dura and reveals that he has already descended to the 94th floor, a place even central figures of the kingdom haven't reached, including Selma herself. The newcomers are impressed, and a murmur quickly spreads through the crowd about the man's incredible achievement. As if that weren't enough, even though Orhan asks Selma not to put so much pressure on him, she not only says he will be the main reference for everyone inside the dungeon, but also highlights the fact that he was once part of the hero's party, which immediately turns him into a kind of celebrity among the trainees. After the speech, Dura complains that the girl put him on a god-level pedestal of expectations, but she insists it was the best thing to do, since it's important work to help keep the rookies calm. The issue is that, in Orhan's mind, he only wants the title of hero if it's to help his grandfather in the shop, and he hopes this nonsense doesn't give him a headache. Anyway, Selma asks the boy to accompany Team 10, formed by the most promising newcomers, who, if they learn to work together, will easily reach the mid-floors. Selma holds her companion's hand to give him confidence, but he doesn't know if she should trust someone from outside that much. Be that as it may, Orhan Dur goes to the trio of newcomers that form Team 10, where Sophia is included. Orhan thought someone was missing, but upon learning that all the members of his team were indeed there, he starts thinking about how dangerous it is to form a team with so few rookies. The boy in the trio explains, full of charm, that no one can keep up with their pace, and Orhan worries about how this kid will turn out when he grows up if he's already this full of attitude at his age. He then asks his subordinates to introduce themselves. The boy says his name is Logan Hayward, the enchanter who will one day surpass Selma. Next, Caroline Inglot introduces herself as a defender. The escort notices that the girl has little equipment for the class she belongs to, but she explains that she is a defender who doesn't use armor or a shield, because she prefers dodging instead of blocking, since she can't even think about disgusting monsters touching her. But because she has a huge desire to kill all of them, she chose the class that allows her to get as close as possible to those enemies. Orhan points out that dodging attacks is much more difficult than protecting yourself with a shield, especially for someone without experience like Caroline, so he asks whether anyone in the clan opposed the girl's choice. Logan says yes, but that their companion simply ignored everyone and went ahead with her decision. This comment sparks an argument between the two, and to put an end to the foolishness, Dura asks the last member of the trio to introduce herself. So, Sophia Claudel says her name to everyone and identifies herself as a rear-line attack mage. When Sophia finishes speaking, Logan and Caroline start arguing again, and Orhan realizes this mission won't be easy at all. However, to his surprise, the kids go quiet as soon as they enter the labyrinth. Caroline asks what a member of the hero's party is doing on this expedition, since she thought their clans were rivals. As Selma had already said, Orhan reminds her that he is no longer part of that group, since it is a highly prestigious team. The girl insists on knowing why he left, but he refuses to answer in any way. Changing the subject, Caroline assumes that Sophia must already know the escort, because she said they would be accompanied by someone incredible. Caroline demands an answer from her colleague to know whether this is the incredible guy she mentioned. And when cornered, Sophia turns as red as her hair, but reveals that Orhan Dur saved her life, besides being very strong and having been part of the hero's party. She also says her sister told her she didn't need to worry because Dura would be there, not seeing himself as a hero at any moment. Even if the girl sees him that way, the enchanter wonders whether Selma only praised him like that to calm the sister down. Suddenly, two wolves that had been silently observing decide to leap at the adventurers, but they fall into a magical trap placed by Orhan along the path, which gives him certainty that he did the right thing preparing these devices along their route. especially to deal with enemies that attack from behind without spending too much time. After all, time is something they don't have much of, and if they're going to waste any, it should be on harder fights. Some time later, when Team 10 reaches the 20th floor, Orhan has watched his rookies fight enough to understand he won't have problems for the rest of the training expedition. Honestly, he thought Logan was just a cocky kid, but he really is a skilled enchanter. If he manages to perform well in longer battles, he will certainly be very useful in a ranked group in the future. However, even though he is a genius, he is terrible at giving orders, which is essential for his class, although he can develop this skill over time, of course. Caroline is indeed extremely fast, as a dodge-type defender requires, but she has two problems. The first is that she attacks impulsively and without thinking, and although she really does need to be the group's front line, the way she exposes herself is concerning. Second, Caroline uses only 2 daggers as her weapon, which certainly matches her style, but does not provide enough firepower for the group. Lastly, Sophia is not as impressive as the other two, but she is already stronger than a common rookie. She was a bit passive during the fights and failed by hesitating at certain moments, but that will change once she connects better with her teammates. Also, Sophia doesn't have any very notable weaknesses, which creates expectations regarding her future development. Meanwhile, with help from the 3 escorts, Selma's group defeats the boss of the 20th floor, then asks the newcomers to register the floor on their guild cards so the expedition can end for the day. With some free time, the Enchantress goes to Orhan to hear what he thought of the first day. He agrees that Team 10 has a lot of potential, but he regrets that they're not working very well together. He even admits he's especially worried about Caroline, although Selma insists the girl has improved a lot recently. That makes the boy wonder what she must have been like in the past if she still behaves this way today. The next day, Orhan Dura is shocked when he reads a front-page story in the newspaper about the new enchanter of the hero's party, which makes it public that Orhan was expelled from the team. Upset by the humiliation, he crushes the newspaper in his hands. He also fears that some rookie may have read the article and started seeing him differently, which is exactly what he doesn't want. When he leaves the inn and heads toward the meeting point, Dura is approached by a girl named Luna, whom he hasn't seen in a long time. Back in the hero's party, even when Orhan was treated worse and worse, Luna was the one who kept treating him kindly, just like always. And when he was expelled, she wasn't there. She had been away doing something for her family, and if she had been there, things probably would have turned out differently. Faced with yet another complicated issue involving his former team, Dura realizes how much this subject has really been consuming his mind. Luna practically begs her friend to come back to the party, but when he asks whether the others feel the same, she admits that she's the only one asking for the enchanter's return. Still, if Orhan decides to come back, she'll do everything she can to convince the others. Even though he's caught off guard, Orhan can see in Luna's eyes that she's serious, but he declares that it's already too late for that, especially after the article he just read. Hearing this, Luna takes his hand and reminds him that they promised to finish the Great Labyrinth together. But Orhan hardens his expression, pulls his hand away, and says that this was a promise the two of them made together with Oliver, and Oliver was the one who expelled him from the team, so that promise will never be fulfilled. With that, Orhan walks away, irritated, admitting to himself that he wanted the 3 of them to stay together forever, that he truly wanted them to fulfill what they promised. But there's no use crying over spilled milk. Orhan Dura no longer has anywhere to go back to. Continuing his walk, the boy reflected on how he had been expelled from the heroes group for being weak. That was even what the newspaper said. Orhan knew that at some point, a new member would join the group. But the truth is that he couldn't avoid feeling bad about it, even more so after that article, which called into question the credibility he had as an adventurer, something that could make it harder for him to find a new group. In fact, it wasn't just in Orhan's head that people would comment on the newspaper story. The rookies had found out about it and were talking among themselves about the case, including Logan, who began to question whether their instructor had really told the truth about his old group. At that moment, Orhan arrived and said good morning to the youths who, even though they tried to keep things the same, made it clear to the enchanter that the atmosphere was quite strange, especially after how much Selma had introduced him as if he were a god. Speaking of her, Selma came running and apologized for not knowing about the newspaper article. Orhan said she didn't need to apologize and that the expedition would be a failure if the leader lost her composure. The woman regretted not being more careful before using Dura as inspiration, but he was the one who apologized for not being completely honest. In any case, he kept his word that he would support the enchanter on this expedition, whatever happened. So she should keep her head held high as always. In a relaxed tone, Bernard stated that at least Orhan really had reached the 94th floor, and the other attendants reaffirmed that they still felt at ease with the company of someone so strong. In line with that, Selma highlighted that Orhan's work yesterday did not fall short in any way. In other words, everything was in its proper place and functioning as it should. Then, the three youths from Group 10 approached to wish the escort good morning, and he immediately brought up the subject of the newspaper. Sophia grumbled that the article was full of lies, just like Caroline said, but Logan wanted to know whether what was written there was true. Orhan confessed that most of it was true, which surprised the boy. By the way, the escort admitted that he really had been too weak and, even today, he is not the hero everyone expects. Sophia pointed out how strong the man was for having defeated more than a dozen orcs in the blink of an eye, and he acknowledged that he was strong enough to take the kids up to the 51st floor, and, even if he wasn't a hero, as an explorer, he promised to protect the three youths from any threat and hoped they would do their best, just as they had yesterday. Hearing that, Caroline and Sophia got excited for another day at Orhan's side. But Logan felt like a fool for getting excited. So, Group 10 reached the 21st floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. The goal was to reach the 35th, but the escorts were not allowed to give any instructions to the rookies until they reached the middle floors, starting from the 31st. In other words, until then, the rookies would lead the exploration, which they had been doing very well up to the 29th floor. Or rather, Sophia and Caroline, because it was becoming increasingly obvious that Logan did not trust himself as an instructor. On the 31st floor, it was time for Orhan Dura to instruct the kids again, so he needed to stay alert. He sensed the presence of monsters ahead and asked everyone to get ready. When the goblins appeared, he told Caroline to draw their attention. Once again, the girl acted thoughtlessly and exposed herself more than necessary, which made the escort keep an eye on her. Next, he told Sophia to deal with the orcs at the rear, while Logan was supposed to use support magic. However, before Orhan finished speaking, Logan had already begun doing so, because, in his mind, the instructions Dura gave were the same that anyone would give, nothing different, so the boy wanted to confront his escort. With her buffs, Caroline handled the frontline goblins easily, but Sophia was trembling with fear at an orc that had appeared in front of her, probably because of the trauma she had suffered. Watching the scene from afar, Logan asked whether Orhan wasn't going to help the girl, and as the monster got closer and the escort didn't move, the boy came to the conclusion that he really couldn't count on him. Suddenly, Orhan cast an agility reduction on the orc and reassured Sophia, reminding her that she was accompanied by her teammates, so she should stay calm and do her best. Thus, Sophia focused and cast a powerful fire dart at the orc, leaving her companions impressed that she had used an advanced attack spell. Meanwhile, while Caroline hugged her friend for doing so well, Logan grew more and more confused by the whole situation. When they descended to the 35th floor, they faced a deadly tarantula, which Logan was sure they were not capable of defeating. On the other hand, Orhan told him to use agility increase and durability increase on Caroline, as well as boost Sophia's magic. The boy grumbled to himself that the instruction was the same as always, while Caroline once again repeated the behavior of charging forward carelessly. Logan panicked and ran after her, but Orhan told him to stay where he was, because the boy would be at a disadvantage if he went to the front line. That said, Orhan told Caroline to jump over the spider and slash its back. When the defender managed to do so with great agility, the escort told her to keep drawing the enemy's attention but to be careful with its venom. At that moment, Logan buffed his companion, making it easier for her to deal with the deadly tarantula's attacks. Orhan pointed out that the defender's mobility depended on Logan and that he should support her above all else. At the same time, he told Sophia to limit the spider's movements, so the mage cast Air Cutter, which sliced the creature's 4 right legs in half. Quickly, Orhan tells Logan to use the strength and technique boost on Caroline, but because the boy hesitated for a moment, thinking the fight was already won, that gave the spider enough time to wrap the defender in its web and start pulling her toward its mouth. Orhan advises the girl to cut the web with her daggers, and Logan starts to suspect that the guide gave that instruction because he already knew this was going to happen. Orhan tells Sophia to prepare a stone arrow, while the party's enchanter needs to cast another magic boost on Sophia, since the previous buff is about to end. While Caroline screams that she can't tear through the web, Orhan reflects that Logan can only use 3 spells at a time, so there's no helping it, the guide needs to step in. Right away, Dura casts Sharpening Boost to sharpen Caroline's daggers, allowing her to cut the web that was holding her with ease. Then he tells Sophia to take action, and she fires the stone arrow at the deadly tarantula, defeating the creature instantly. At the same moment, Caroline runs to celebrate with Sophia, while Orhan tells Logan that everything worked only because of his support magic. The boy, embarrassed, thanks him, but continues looking at the guide in a strange way as Orhan calls everyone to head back to the surface. After the day's expedition, Selma gathers the rookies at the dungeon entrance to announce that tomorrow is the last day, so everyone must rest to be in good condition. Later, while heading home, Orhan is called by Bernard and Anthem to grab something to eat. Orhan is surprised that the two don't seem bothered by him. In fact, Bernard celebrates when the enchanter agrees to go out with them. They hadn't had a chance to talk properly because of the rush of the expedition, and Dura thinks this might be a good opportunity. Meanwhile, Group 10 is being taken back to the city in a carriage. Logan brings up the topic of Sophia being saved by Orhan, according to what she had said, and the girl explains that he rescued her 3 days ago in a newly discovered labyrinth. Sounding somewhat agitated, the boy asks his companion to tell them everything about their guide, what spells he used, and how he fought. After thinking for a moment, Sophia remembers that Orhan used an incredible gust of wind and also strengthened his sword with support magic. Logan believes he used a Sharpening Boost, a spell used to buff weapons, not people. Caroline points out that this was the spell the instructor used on her today, which made her knives very sharp. Based on what was said, Logan understands that Orhan also knows how to use close combat weapons, and Sophia explains that he switched to a frontline attacker after being expelled from the hero's party. Hearing about Orhan's change, Logan is surprised, since the instructor behaved like a perfect enchanter earlier. On top of that, the boy recognizes that he felt angry because he thought Orhan had let him down. But during the battle against the orcs, Dura used Agility Reduction in secret, a type of debuff that even Selma rarely uses because it's extremely difficult, yet Orhan used it easily. Remembering the fight against the deadly tarantula, Logan realizes it was the first time he truly understood the importance of formations, because if the defender keeps the enemy distracted, the attacker and the supporter have space and time to focus on their roles. Orhan even seemed to know exactly when each buff would end. And he also predicted the spider's web attack, which can only mean one thing. Orhan Dura was reading the situation perfectly and giving the most appropriate instructions for each case. That makes him an excellent enchanter. But Logan doesn't understand why he switched to the front line. Maybe he really is a true genius, able to fight in such different ways, and the boy doesn't want to be left behind, so he promises to do his best to achieve his dream of becoming the greatest enchanter. Caroline comments that he has a scary look on his face, and he says he's just motivated for tomorrow. Later, when they arrive at the Silver Rabbit's Tavern, Bernard and Anthem insist on paying today's bill. Bernard assumes the enchanter must have celebrated a lot for having been part of the hero's party, but Orhan only remembers doing all the administrative work and not having time to have fun. Because of that, the other guides are outraged at the spiteful tone of that newspaper article, and Orhan thanks them for the empathy. Anthem asks if he really was the enchanter of that group, because when they met, Dura had said he was an attacker. Orhan explains that he switched to swordsman for good when he left the team. That is, he was already performing that role in the hero's party, and, being honest, he wanted that more than anyone. Influenced by his grandfather, who was also a swordsman. His grandfather had been an explorer, and long ago, when a gigantic monster appeared in their village, the man defeated the creature with a single sword. Seeing that made Dura want to be like him. When asked how he ended up becoming an enchanter, Orhan explains that it happened when the hero's party started descending deeper and deeper, and their pace began to drop. After all, with each floor they descended, the monsters became stronger, which led to the idea of looking for an enchanter to join the team, since that profession had been gaining a lot of attention at the time. But because Orhan was considered a jack of all trades and could do anything, he ended up being the one who had to switch classes. Anthem feels bad for him, but acknowledges his merit in leading the team all the way to the 94th floor, suggesting that the decision ended up being the right one. However, Orhan disagrees with a serious expression, saying that even though he switched, the group should have slowed down and grown stronger. When his companions ask what he means, he dodges the question and claims he's being too harsh on his old team. The truth is, as he thinks to himself, he can't say more than that. After all, the chance of the hero's party going beyond the 94th floor is 0. Since the guy was hiding his hand, Bernard changes the subject and asks what his ideal swordsman is like. Orhan answers that the best one is a jack of all trades who's effective at practically everything, the kind who can go from the lowest floors all the way up on his own. That's what he wants to be. Meanwhile, Caroline is taking a bath and laments that she and Sophia will have to say goodbye to Orhan after the last day of the expedition. Sophia also feels sad thinking about it and admits that she wishes he would stay with the silver rabbits. Since that's how she feels, Caroline advises her friend to ask him to stay, and although Sophia is sure it won't work, the defender insists that he might actually accept the girl's invitation just like her own sister did. Sophia replies that Orhan isn't like Selma, but either way, it really would be sad not to see the escort anymore, which makes the girl think that maybe she should make that request so she doesn't miss the opportunity. The next day, the heroes' party shows up at the dungeon entrance and draws the attention of all the adventurers who were there. While Oliver radiates confidence, Luna is visibly uncomfortable. Next, Orhan Dura approaches the newcomers for the last day in which he must report for this service. Excited, the three children welcome the instructor with joy, and Caroline admits she would be even happier if they received a reward for completing this mission. Logan asks what she would like to receive, and the girl looks at Sophia, who becomes extremely embarrassed because she knows exactly what she would like to receive in this case: for Orhan Dura to stay in the night sky silver rabbits. With nowhere to run, Sophia gathers the courage to confess what she wishes for. But she is interrupted when Orhan Dura is called somewhere else. While heading to the place he was summoned to, Orhan Dura hears two newcomers talking about how the hero party is going into the deeper part of the labyrinth today, starting from the 92nd floor to test the new formation. Hearing that, Orhan Dura thinks it would be much more prudent to run those tests on the upper floors, where the risk is lower. But he quickly tries to forget about it. Speaking of which, on the 92nd floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth, Oliver is determined to conquer this dungeon. After all, they no longer have a loser preventing victory. Not only the leader, but the other members also remain convinced that Orhan Dura was a burden to the team, except for Luna, of course, whom Oliver wants above all to convince that he was right from the beginning. 2 days earlier, Philly Carpenter had presented herself to the hero party full of enthusiasm in light of the great feats of this famous team. According to Oliver, Philly Carpenter is a talented adventurer who reached the 100th floor in the Great Western Labyrinth, and she will be the team's first real enchanter. Derek and Annalie were satisfied that they no longer had to rely on that guy from before. Philly Carpenter even thanked them for the welcome party, and Derek commented that now that they weren't stuck with that nuisance on the team, they had every reason to celebrate. In fact, he was even startled when he saw the curtains Orhan Dura managed and realized that the hero party had a lot of money. Philly Carpenter asks if that money wasn't meant to fund the group's activities, but Oliver asks them to stop talking about Orhan Dura, because today is the new enchanter's welcome party. In the middle of the party, Luna arrives running to deliver urgent news, and although she is surprised to see the new girl, she puts that aside to reveal that Orhan Dura is going into the Great Southern Labyrinth with the Night Sky Silver Rabbits. Immediately, the other members begin questioning how someone that useless could possibly enter such a powerful clan, while Luna demands to know what happened while she was gone. It is at that moment that she learns, through her teammates, that Orhan Dura was expelled from the team. Then the leader introduces the new enchanter. Luna remembers how clear she had been when she opposed replacing Orhan Dura, and Derek becomes irritated that she is ignoring the new member. Oliver calms the big guy down and argues that, as everyone already knew, Orhan Dura is not strong enough to be on this team. Luna, however, always disagrees strongly with that and sees that guy as the core of the hero party, believing that they only got as far as they did because of him, and that the team will not be able to move forward without Orhan Dura. Offended, Annalie stresses that the rest of the group disagrees about the jack of all trades, but either way, there was no point complaining anymore. Orhan Dura was out, and that was it. Faced with the facts, Luna ends up giving in and accepting that there really is nothing she can do now. Then Oliver sighs in relief and starts a discussion about the immediate plans, since this is Philly Carpenter's first day. This time, the plan would be to run a test with a newcomer on the 92nd floor in 2 days, and if everything went well, they would descend to the 94th. However, Luna opposes the plan because she has no intention of kicking the bucket. Once again, she offends the other members of the group while explaining that, although Philly Carpenter is a talented enchanter, it would be prudent for them to start from the easier floors and then go down. Derek and Annalie insist that the 92nd floor will be easy, but Luna reminds them that the black dragon is there, and that they almost got beaten last time they faced that creature. Even so, the team members radiate arrogance and continue blaming Orhandura, saying he was getting in the way of the rest of the team. Oliver tries to calm the situation by reminding them they would only be testing the new formation, and therefore would not fight the black dragon. But Derek and Annalie remain convinced that they should confront that monster. Luna continues insisting that it would be irresponsible to do that without Orhandura, but Oliver puts his foot down and imposes that the plan will be followed no matter what. And so, we return to the present moment, where the hero party faces powerful enemies, even though they still haven't synced with the new member of the team. At the moment, they face a kind of mammoth with impressive endurance. Oliver tries to cut the monster, but its tusks are long and prevent the adventurer from getting close. Failing, the leader retreats and lets Derek take the front line with his shield, while he feels his body becoming heavier as his buffs wear off. Knowing things will get ugly if this continues, he asks Philly Carpenter why the buffs keep ending, and the enchanter, visibly anxious, replies that she still doesn't quite understand how the companions fight. Immediately, this makes Oliver remember that Orhandura had understood everything in less than an hour on his first day. Meanwhile, Derek takes a burst of power from the mammoth and is almost thrown to the ground. Then he gets scolded by Annalie because she was nearly hit. Trying to keep up appearances, the tank knows he could easily block that kind of attack. But today it's complicated. Annalie responds with a sequence of fire bullets that don't even tickle the monsters so much, so that Oliver thinks the sorceress must be joking. However, the truth is that her attack power is really quite weak right now. Worried, Oliver tells Philly Carpenter to buff the mage. The enchanter had already done that, but she tries to reinforce the spell anyway. Annalie tests her strength again by repeating the fire bullets, but once again they cause no damage at all to the opponent. Increasingly incredulous, Oliver thinks about how Philly Carpenter's support magic should be far stronger than Orhandura's. Even so, Derek is suffering on the front line trying to withstand the mammoth's overwhelming power. So he asks the leader to do something. Coming back to the real world, Oliver tells Annalie to circle around to flank the enemy. But the monster immediately notices her movement and almost hits the mage, forcing her to retreat. Because of that, Oliver asks Philly Carpenter to watch the monster's next attack and warn the group. But she regretfully says she won't be able to do that. Oliver argues that an enchanter's duty is to understand the flow of the battle. But Philly Carpenter can only use support magic for now, which starts to irritate Annalie. The team's leader sees how much weaker they all seem and begins to panic because he can't understand why until Luna finally approaches to explain the reason for everyone's weakness. However, just as she is about to reveal it, the famous black dragon suddenly appears, intimidating everyone with its terrifying appearance and destructive aura, eyes bulging. Oliver points out that this dragon wasn't supposed to leave the floor boss area. Unconcerned, the winged monster stomps the mammoth like it was an insect. Its size is simply unbelievable. Luna shouts that they must retreat, but Derek and Annalie refuse, giving the final word. Oliver argues that they've beaten this monster before and can do it again. So they charge at the black dragon, which responds by spitting a fireball at Derek. Even though he raises his shield to protect himself, the human is still thrown across the ground by the sheer force. While Luna runs to heal him, Oliver questions why Philly Carpenter didn't buff the tank. But the harsh reality is that the enchanter is completely frozen with fear. Annalie fires a fire lance, but once again her magic has no effect at all on the enemy. Fortunately, when the dragon counterattacks, it ends up hitting a rock with its fireball instead of the girl directly. Though she still takes considerable damage, seeing the critical situation, Luna keeps insisting they should fall back, while Oliver struggles to concentrate amid the chaos and the looming possibility of everyone's death. When the black dragon begins charging its strongest power, the swordsman manages to snap Philly Carpenter back to her senses so she can cast a buff on him. Once she does, the team leader begins a magic convergence. Luna thinks he needs more convergence, but there's no time left for anything else. So Oliver casts Divine Flash, which collides with the black dragon's attack and causes an explosion. After that, the man sees that the monster remains completely untouched, and that's enough for him to understand that this battle cannot be won. Giving up, he finally asks Luna what they should do, but Luna reminds him that he's the leader and that he needs to pull himself together and get back into the fight. Still, seeing he's barely holding on, the girl says the only way out is to use the whimsical portal, a magical item used for emergency escapes that can only be activated inside a labyrinth. It creates a forced spatial connection between the place where it's used and another location. On the other hand, Philly Carpenter says that this item will send the group to a random floor boss area, either on an upper or lower floor, meaning they'll have to face another boss. Even so, Luna thinks it's better than fighting the Black Dragon, which is one of the strongest bosses. Therefore, Oliver pulls out the whimsical portal and throws it on the ground, opening the passage the party must enter. Struggling, the members move too slowly and are prevented from entering by the Black Dragon, which spits a stream of flames and, strangely enough, enters the portal alone. It closes right after the creature goes through. Derek feels relieved that they escaped, but Luna explains it's actually the worst thing that could have happened, because the Black Dragon might have ended up in a much weaker place where beginner adventurers could be attacked. For that reason, she plans to ask the guild to forcibly teleport everyone out. That's a function guild cards have, allowing people to be evacuated from labyrinths during critical moments like this, even believing they might face some punishment from the guild. Oliver decides to go forward with the plan and moves to the next step. But Luna reminds him that Derek and Annalie are injured and can't walk yet. As Luna heals the others, she says that when they request forced teleportation, they will have to fight the Black Dragon immediately, and she believes it would be wise to replace Philly Carpenter with Orhandura when that moment comes. Naturally, the other members resist the idea, so the girl explains that, just when she was about to say why the hero party was supposedly weaker, the truth is that everyone is as strong as they've always been. Nothing has changed. Oliver can't understand how that's possible, since even his strongest move, Divine Flash, didn't even scratch the dragon. According to Luna, the answer is simple. They don't have Orhandura anymore. For example, Oliver barely did any magic convergence earlier, which shows how weak his Divine Flash was under those circumstances. By the way, she asks if the leader knows what all support magic has in common. He replies that the amount an attribute is boosted depends on the caster, and the duration of the effect depends on the target. The enchanter must reapply the buff before it ends, and these support spells typically last about 3 minutes. Philly Carpenter explains that this would be correct, but all the members of the hero party have extremely high resistance to magic, so a buff doesn't last more than 2 minutes, especially for Oliver, who can't maintain one for even a full minute, even if the leader becomes furious at what he's hearing. Luna states that his body is incompatible with any enchanter. The issue is that Orhandura could squeeze milk from a stone and practically did the impossible. Oliver argues that Philly Carpenter should also be able to do that, since anyone is more talented than Orhandura. In response, Luna reminds him that Orhandura was aware of his own weaknesses, and that he developed original spells precisely to compensate for them. When they hear that the guy created his own magic, Oliver, Derek, and Annalie are stunned and refuse to believe it, but Luna assures them it's the truth. With that said, she stops the healing and reminds them that they don't have much time, so it's time to leave. Next, as they all run out of the labyrinth, Oliver remembers that Orhandura really had said something about creating original spells, but he was still much weaker than the other enchanters. Luna refutes this, since Orhandura was able to create a support spell that increases power by more than 50 times. Philly Carpenter thinks that's impossible, since even Selma of the Silver Rabbits can only manage a 10-fold increase. That makes Oliver realize that his Divine Flash depended on Orhandura's buffs to actually be strong, which Luna confirms. After all, both the swordsman's technique and Annalie's attack spells were literally 50 times stronger with Orhandura's support. This made Oliver arrogant, to the point that he stopped worrying so much about concentrating his magical energy when using that ability, and if he had focused a little more, he might have at least knocked down the Black Dragon. The same goes for Annalie, who could only use mediocre spells in that last fight, which made it clear that she can only cast her special ones with support from their jack-of-all-trades. Finally, Orhandura also helped with Derek's defense, mainly because his buffs affect equipment and spells as well, so when the support magic wore off, the party members didn't suddenly feel their bodies grow heavier. Sometime later, the heroes' party is spotted by adventurers outside. Oliver hears some people commenting on how they are heroes, but the boy rejects that title since they're putting all those adventurers in danger. Even so, it's true that they already defeated the Black Dragon once, and Oliver knows he did it with his own hands, so the heroes' party does not need Orhandura. Early the next morning, it was the last day of the expedition. Standing before his students, Orhandura explained that the goal was to go from the 36th to the 50th floor of the labyrinth. Then, once they reached the 51st floor, they should use the teleport crystals to return. Watching the cloudy sky, the instructor felt that something was wrong lingering in the air, and on the very day the event was coming to an end, maybe it was the weird way Logan was staring at him, but if he had to guess, Orhandura would say the problem was the Great Southern Labyrinth. Caroline, excited as ever, asked what kind of monsters they would encounter today, since she could barely wait to take them all down. Letting out a deep sigh, the tutor once again asked her not to run ahead like a lunatic, since she was a defender. Caroline argued that she needed to give everything she had on the front line to ease the burden on the rest of the group, and that this was why she chose that profession. But Orhandura made it clear that there was a limit to what a single person could do in a battle, and that it was important for her to start thinking of herself as part of the team, not as an independent element acting however she pleased. Caroline called the teacher annoying, so Logan scolded her, pointing out that Orhandura was only being kind and offering important advice, reminding her that even the famous Albert Sensible said teamwork was important. Orhandura questioned whether the boy really meant that Albert Sensible, and the name caught Selma Claudel's attention. Orhandura stated that Albert Sensible had been an absolute ace of the night sky silver rabbits, but unfortunately died fighting the black dragon on the 92nd floor. Caroline added, lowering her head, that Albert Sensible was killed while protecting a teammate who should have been protecting him, since they were the defender. According to her, the enchanter knew that if he died, everyone's smiles would disappear and nothing would remain. That was why you had to keep the people you were protecting away from you. Realizing Caroline's behavior was entirely connected to this, Orhandura chose not to interfere for now, since it was clearly something very deep-rooted in her mind. Instead, he smiled and said that everyone was counting on their defender in today's mission. She smiled back and accepted the responsibility. Sophia asked if the instructor also had something to say to help her improve, while Logan grew jealous and begged the leader to tell him how to become stronger. Later, on the 36th floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth, while the kids warmed up for what was coming, Selma Claudel approached Orhandura to comment that the boys seemed to have taken a liking to him. For his part, Orhandura had been worried about how they saw him after that newspaper story, but in the end, it seemed they had accepted him. Selma remarked that Caroline and Logan had the kind of talent that made trouble, but would have a bright future ahead. Changing the subject, she had heard them talking about Albert Sensible and said that losing him had been a great setback for the team at the time, and that this was exactly why the heroes group managed to pull ahead and conquer the Great Labyrinth. Orhandura replied that facing the Black Dragon had also been very difficult for them, and that they could easily have lost someone, just as Selma Claudel's team had. According to her, Albert Sensible had been someone they could always count on, which left a huge emptiness in everyone's heart. Smiling, Orhandura said he hoped they would find a replacement just as good, and Selma joked that he was pretending to be clueless, then asked what he thought. Orhan said a group didn't need two enchanters, especially if one of them was the best in the continent. Since Orhandura decided to become a swordsman, Selma hoped he would handle things well. However, he chose to do it. Next, on the 40th floor, Selma gathered the rookies to divide them into teams before facing that floor's boss. However, Team 10 ended up alone in this mission, which made Caroline worried and feeling isolated, although Logan thought it showed how much the higher-ups trusted them. Orhandura explained that there were several different paths through the labyrinth, so the kids needed to learn how to split up and find the floor boss. Even so, Caroline didn't like the idea of getting separated in a place like this, but Orhan emphasized that this was why it was important to gather information first. Adventurers would walk the floor several times to map it out, find the correct route, and share that information with others, which was why larger clans had an advantage. Caroline then said it was time for the professor to share what he knew with the rookies, since he had gone deeper into this labyrinth than anyone else. Logan thought it was a great idea to learn more about the creatures waiting for them in the more dangerous areas, and the instructor said that the lower floors started at the 76th and were like a snow-covered mountain. He tried explaining more about what happened down there, but the kids were so excited that they kept interrupting him with new questions until Orhandura completely lost his patience. Meanwhile, Lunar rushed into the Adventurers Guild and urgently demanded the guild master, since they needed to teleport everyone out of the Great Southern Labyrinth immediately. Back inside the dungeon, the kids' instincts told them something was wrong. They had walked a long time without encountering a single monster. Logan asked the instructor if it was normal for this floor to be like that, and he said no. Deep down, he felt the same sensation he'd had before entering this cavern, like the monsters were afraid of something. In the middle of this, Caroline couldn't stand waiting to fight anymore, until finally a monster appeared before them. As expected, the girl dashed straight toward it. The creature raised its club to strike her as soon as she got close. But before that could happen, Orhandura cast an agility reduction on it to make sure his student wouldn't get hurt. With the path clear, Caroline delivers 2 quick strikes that finish the creature off, then starts celebrating. Logan comments with concern that Azero goblins are extremely fast and strong, and that if Orhandura hadn't cast a debuff on it, the story would have been different. Caroline doesn't want any moral lesson because she won, but Orhandura insists that the defender is the core of the group, and if she gets into trouble, Logan and Sophia will do anything to save their companion, which would put them in danger. The very thing she wants to avoid. Seeing that everyone is genuinely worried and disappointed, Caroline apologizes, while Orhandura explains that dodge-type defenders can use something called active defense, and since the girl can't settle down and focus on protection, he's going to teach her that technique. It's a method of drawing enemy attacks and then restricting them. For example, every living being physically prepares before attacking, like taking a step forward before throwing a punch. If Caroline cuts the attacker's leg at that moment, he won't be able to take the step he needs to attack. Therefore, if she can read the enemy's movements and strike the exact point they use to commit to an attack, the defender can prevent damage to the team. Excited, Caroline is sure this will be her trump card to always act on the front line. Though Orhandura says the goal is not to defeat enemies, reminding her that her role is to draw their attention and stop their actions. Returning to the guild alongside the entire heroes party, Luna asks the director for a forced teleport. The man says the mana cost for something like that is enormous and that he needs an excellent justification to use it. So the woman explains that the Black Dragon, the boss of the 92nd floor, transported itself through a whimsical portal to a far less advanced floor, meaning it could run into rookies at any moment. The clerk beside them argues that a conference is required to make a decision of that level. But Luna raises her voice to say there's no time for that, because no one in the labyrinth has any idea what is happening. Inside the dungeon, Logan doesn't want the instructor talking only about Caroline anymore, so he asks to learn something too, like a debuff or something similar. Orhandura reminds him that debuffs are extremely advanced spells and are more influenced by the target's attributes than buffs are. Therefore, the boy needs to know exactly what the target's magical resistance is and adjust the spell accordingly. Floor bosses as well as the powerful monsters they will encounter from the 61st floor onward will almost never be affected. In fact, even adventurers who can use this type of spell usually don't, because they're not very efficient, and if Logan wants to use them, he'll need to figure out the magical resistance of every creature in the deep floors. The boy is completely discouraged by this bucket of cold water, while Orhandura emphasizes that the boy's priority should be mastering the buffs he already knows and gaining more experience. So, instead, Orhandura is going to teach him to use magic in a fun way, and asks him to look behind him. When he does, Logan sees 2 wolves falling into a magical trap and being violently impaled by powerful spears. Frightened, the children ask when he placed that trap there, and he says he has been preparing traps all along the path since they entered the labyrinth. The lesson is, if Logan can avoid being attacked from behind, the group can focus only on what comes from ahead. After all, it's also the enchanter's job to use these traps to restrain enemy attacks and create a favorable battlefield for his team. Grateful for the lesson, Logan's eyes shine as he realizes that this guy is the kind of enchanter he wants to be. Lastly, Orhandura turns to Sophia. At the Adventurers Guild, they begin the forced teleport, but it will take time to gather the mana needed for the spell. One of the casters says it will all be Oliver's fault for allowing this to happen. But Derek and Annalie protest, saying they didn't do anything wrong. An argument is about to break out, but the guildmaster orders everyone to focus on the spell, because many lives are at stake. Luna, in turn, thinks that Orhandura may be in danger. Speaking of him, the instructor says Sophia needs parallel construction, the ability to use 2 or more spells at the same time, something every high-level mage must be able to do. It seems difficult, but once she gets used to it, the girl will manage at least 2 at once, since there are people who can cast dozens. Sophia thought that simply using special rank magic was enough to be an advanced mage, and Orhandura says that the deeper they go into the labyrinth, most monsters cannot be defeated with a single special rank spell, and even if she tries using several in sequence, that takes time she won't have when dealing with stronger enemies. That's where parallel construction comes in. It consists of starting a second spell when the first is only halfway through. optimizing the wasted time so she can attack efficiently. Still, a mage isn't made only of advanced spells. Even weaker spells have their importance when used at the right time. In the instructor's opinion, the student is strong enough to fight on the intermediate floors, so she should ask the veterans of the Sky Knight Silver Rabbits to teach her something. For example, Selma Claudel, her sister, being honest and embarrassed about it. Sophia admits she would rather have Orhan Dura teach her instead of her sister, thinking about how Selma Claudel will react when he tells her that Orhan Dura thinks it's better to ask Selma for permission first. But even so, Sophia is pleased, since her sister does everything she asks. During all of this, the forced teleportation spell is ready, but it still needs to be filled with mana. Only when that is done will the magic actually be able to be cast. At the same time, the guild master states that the hero's party must defeat the Black Dragon. Derek and Annalie straight up chicken out, especially after the last fight they had, but Luna accepts the mission without thinking twice. However, before that, she makes a request to the master. Meanwhile, after opening the floor boss's gate, Selma Claudel tells the newcomers to wait in the safe zone while the escorts handle things. With that, the more experienced adventurers face the main enemy of this floor, and everyone is counting on Orhan Dura's reputation to make it out alive. Taking responsibility, the enchanter guarantees that he will provide the support needed for the fight to end in just a few minutes, something Anthem doesn't seem very confident about. In any case, while the newcomers protect themselves at the back of the room, Orhan Dura quickly moves forward and lands a cut on the giant's thigh with his sword, and Caroline notices that he reproduced what he taught her earlier: active defense. After taking the hit, the giant steps back a few paces and falls into a magic trap that raises a stone wall, which makes Logan realize that the instructor cut off the enemy's escape route after predicting its movements. At the same time, Selma Claudel begins a parallel construction, casting several spells at once, something Sophia watches with her own eyes for the first time. During the fight, when Bernard blocks an attack with his shield, Anthem takes advantage of the opening in the giant's guard to land a powerful sword strike that ends the battle. Based on what they saw, Team 10 understood in practice the things Orhan Dura had been telling them earlier, making them grasp the true meaning of teamwork. Running toward the Great Southern Labyrinth with the hero's party, Oliver asks why Luna asked the guild master to remove people from floors 40 to 51st, and she explains it's because Orhan Dura must be there. Annalie doesn't understand what that has to do with the jack-of-all-trades guy, and Luna replies that the hero's party is currently the weakest S-rank team. In other words, they have no chance of facing the Black Dragon alone. Derek gets pissed at her statement, but she stands by it, saying it's impossible to fight without Orhan Dura in this confrontation. Later, at the 50th floor boss, Selma Claudel leaves the initiative to Orhan Dura, because if he cuts the crab's claws, only the shell will be left for the rest, giving them time to kill the thing and still head back to celebrate. Orhan Dura jokes that she makes it sound easy, but she answers that for him, it really is. Bernard asks whether he's really going to go in alone against a giant crab, but Orhan Dura shows no anxiety as he charges in and uses his impact ability to destroy the opponent's claws. This is an original spell created by the enchanter, which increases the strength, magic, and hardness of a piece of equipment by up to 100 times for a single instant. Since this is a kind of cheat he accidentally invented while trying to solve a problem with his magic. The man feels a bit guilty using it, but he needs to survive at all costs on the lower floors. Then, with the crab weakened, the other party members launch their attacks with Selma Claudel's enhancements and completely destroy the enemy. After the victory, the organizer and leader of the expedition praises everyone for their performance over these 3 long days, then announces that it's time to go home. However, the Black Dragon suddenly appears in that boss room, terrifying the adventurers present. Orhan Dura orders everyone to flee at once, while the other escorts, no matter how experienced they are, tremble in fear before such a powerful creature. Even Selma Claudel, known as the most talented enchanter in the kingdom, tries to stay calm so she can lead the situation. Thinking about what could be done, Orhan Dura remembers that the boss of this floor is already dead, and if the adventurers can get past this monster and reach the teleport crystal, they'll be able to escape. The problem is that the enchanter is isolated from the rest of the group, and monsters tend to prioritize crowds. In other words, if the human runs alone, he'll survive, but everyone else will die. So he decides to stay and fight, because his job is to keep the rookies safe, and this is not the moment to betray everyone's trust, even if it costs him his own life. With that, Orhundura shouts for the other escorts to do whatever it takes to protect the rookies. Selma Claudel snaps back to focus and orders her subordinates into a defensive stance, with Anthem and Bernard forming the front line with their shields while Kathy creates a magic wall. When the dragon releases its first fireball, the barrier successfully absorbs the explosion, because the moment the impact was about to happen, Orhundura reinforced the shield with his impact magic, making it possible for everyone to survive such a powerful attack from the Black Dragon. At the same time that Selma Claudel suspects Orhundura's assistance, the man charges toward the enemy and faces it on his own. After dodging a claw swipe, Orhundura throws a dagger at the dragon's eye. The creature has enough reflexes to shut its eyelid before it can be pierced. But as Selma Claudel notes, the enchanter knew that would happen, and his real intention was to use that second when the enemy's eye was shut to move into its blind spot. And that's exactly what happens. Orhundura leaps toward the Black Dragon's neck and lands a sword strike combined with his impact spell, causing a powerful explosion that fills the entire floor. Despite all his effort, the attack causes no damage to the monster. It may have surprised him, but not enough to make him give up. On the contrary, he tells the others to keep protecting the children, since he'll take care of the Black Dragon alone with the plan he has in mind. With that said, he puts on his necklace and, at high speed, draws the monster's attention. The dragon unleashes flames on him and attacks in every possible way, making Selma Claudel worry about leaving the boy alone against this creature, especially since it's clear he's pulling the Black Dragon away from the rookies. This isn't a regular opponent. This is the very creature responsible for killing Albert Sensible, and Selma Claudel couldn't bear to see it happen again. In the middle of all this, the monster spits a fireball, and Orhundura sends it back with a reflective wall, hitting the dragon's head. The rookies of Team 10 are stunned by the incredible spell used by the escort, one of the spells he himself created, a barrier capable of reflecting back anything that touches it. Even so, once again, no serious damage is done, and that begins to worry Orhundura. Either way, he summons several magic circles and merges them to perform Attribute Boost, a high-level spell Selma Claudel knows well, one that combines the 6 types of support magic at the same time to increase attributes. But even if everything doubles, she believes it still won't be enough to defeat the Black Dragon, so she considers entering the fight. But at that moment, Orhundura casts double Attribute Boost, followed by triple, quadruple, and finally quintuple. Selma Claudel sees this and cannot believe it's possible to use the same buff multiple times. But the aura he releases makes it clear that he really has accumulated an absurd amount of power. Right then, the Black Dragon swings its tail in a fast attack at Orhundura, leaving Team 10 in despair. However, while the dragon searches for its target, Orhundura has already leapt behind it, climbing to a great height and grabbing onto the wall above the giant's head. From this point on, Selma Claudel gives up trying to figure out this man's powers. It's obvious he has already surpassed the limit of what a simple enchanter should be able to do. With so many original spells, with 5 consecutive spells used for this purpose, Orhundura has increased all of his attributes 32 times. But he knows he can't maintain it for long, since he is basically using 30 different spells at once, draining the user's energy at an alarming rate. Knowing he has to finish this quickly, the Spellblade runs toward the Black Dragon and avoids a tail swing with an extremely high jump. On the other hand, that should have left the boy vulnerable to a second strike if he hadn't created a platform in midair to push off of, messing up the Black Dragon's prediction of his landing and causing the creature to miss again. This time, Orhundura didn't use magic, but a special ability. Rarely, among humans, someone is born capable of invoking abilities above the average, another type of power different from conventional sorcery. And Orhundura's ability is Magical Convergence, which allows him to gather mana at a single point and materialize it. He can use this energy to propel his body through the air, but it's useful for many other things as well. Oliver, for example, also has this ability, but he only uses it to attack. When Orhundura lunges at the dragon, he imbues his sword with Sharpness Boost and Durability Boost, then strikes the monster's neck with his blade while simultaneously using the impact spell. This time, the attack causes real damage, a deep cut that could determine the outcome of the fight. At the same time, another determining factor appears: the man's exhaustion. He begins dragging himself across the battlefield as the weight of all the stacked buffs starts to overwhelm him. Selma Claudel grows increasingly unsure of what to do, because it's obvious that no human could endure this amount of enhancement for long, not to mention enchanting his weapon and repeatedly using impact on top of everything else. When Orhan Dura stands up to return to the fight, Selma Claudel once again questions whether she should join him at this point, even though he asked her not to. Deep down, Selma Claudel knows that not even the best members of the Night Sky's Silver Rabbits could defeat that creature together, so it may be that she is simply useless in this battle. In the middle of that thought, the Enchantress is taken by a strong tremor running through her body. She doesn't know if it's fear, anxiety, worry, or all of it mixed together. But she understands one thing. Out of everything she could do, the safest choice is to keep protecting the rookies, just as Orhan Dura asked, so he can stay focused on the fight. Speaking of which, after dodging a few energy projectiles, the boy is finally hit by one of them. That takes us to a memory from years ago, when Orhan Dura and Oliver were still innocent children playing in their quiet village. The people there were calm and kind, and the two boys were raised with excellence in a favorable environment, far from the world's suffering. However, one day, the greatest suffering of all overtook the place. When Orhan Dura and Oliver returned from a training session outside the village, everything had been burned down, and the people were all dead. Even though they were just kids, they were forced to witness with their own eyes the peak of horror, something many of us likely couldn't endure. Being children, of course, they cried. On the other hand, what set them apart from any normal child was that they not only buried the villagers themselves, but also swore, from the bottom of their hearts, that they would become strong enough to never again allow someone to take everything they love. In that moment, Orhan Dura and Oliver had not only one another, but above all, an unshakable will to redeem the deep loss that marked them forever. Seeing himself unharmed after being struck by the dragon, Orhan Dura remembers his vow to become an adventurer with enough strength and knowledge to never again be outmatched by anyone, so he could finally protect everyone he loves even if he were facing an enemy as powerful as the Black Dragon. Watching the enchantment swordsman survive, Team 10 celebrates, while Selma Claudel is shocked that he came out unscathed from the Black Dragon's greatest attack. The blast of purple mist it gathers. After all, this is not just any dragon. It is known as the very embodiment of fear, and its tally holds an endless pile of dead adventurers. All Selma Claudel hopes is that Orhan Dura won't become another one. Speaking of him, the enchantment swordsman analyzes that the dragon uses a technique similar to his magic convergence to accumulate power and use the surrounding mana to attack, shaping it in various forms and attacking from every direction. On the other hand, Orhan Dura remembers that this creature had more attacks the last time it defeated him, meaning it's clear the Black Dragon is underestimating him. Without taking any pride in this, the boy looks to take advantage of it instead of being offended. Then, advancing at high speed and zigzagging to escape the mist, Orhan Dura gets close enough to fire a fire bullet and land a sword strike on the target's neck. But its scales still prevent the dragon from taking any damage. In response, the monster fires several shadow mist projectiles, which Orhan Dura retaliates against with a sequence of fast, precise sword movements. However, to avoid having its attack blocked, the dragon splits the next projectile into countless shards, making it impossible for the human to use his sword to deflect them. Instinctively, Orhan Dura raises a stone wall to protect himself. But it is clear that the dragon is increasing its power and fury with every passing second, making the battle more difficult by the moment. Amid a rain of attacks, the creature cleverly fires a projectile that loops around to hit him from behind. But the enchantment swordsman had been perceptive enough to prepare a reflective wall trap, saving himself at the last moment. Without blinking, Bernard comments that Orhan Dura seems to be keeping up with the Black Dragon's pace, but Selma Claudel unfortunately disagrees, as it's becoming obvious that the human is being kept on the defensive. For his part, Orhan Dura also agrees that the situation is extremely complicated. After all, when he defeated this same enemy before, he was accompanied by 4 other S-rank adventurers, in an organized group where each member had a decisive role. That day, Durik and Luna blocked the purple mist, Annalie held the dragon with her magic, and Oliver had Divine Flash as the team's secret weapon. However, today, Orhan Dura has to perform all the roles alone, something that could crush anyone's confidence. But Orhan Dura was determined, driven by the promise he had made as a child when he saw everyone in his village dead before his very eyes. Filled with the inner strength that pushed him forward, the enchantment swordsman charges once again toward the Black Dragon and initiates an active defense stance which, as Caroline aptly points out, is the method used by evasion defenders to intercept enemy attacks. Furthermore, Logan and Sophia notice that the swordsman is driving the dragon even farther away from the rookies, meaning that despite the difficulty of the fight, Orhan is putting everyone else's safety first. In the midst of battle, the boy activates a parallel construction of countless magic circles that fire back at the dragon. The same fire bullets, it uses practically an endless bombardment that engulfs the enemy monster in a never-ending inferno. This is the result of another one of Orhan's original creations, called Increase and Repeat, a trap spell that absorbs surrounding mana and repeats the previous attack at a higher intensity. With it, the man was able to create magical damage as powerful as Annalise, and even though the dragon managed to break free from the attacks and still remained standing, the human knew he was capable of finishing this fight without the help of his former teammates. With the opponent weakened, Orhan now needs to take on the role of the attacker, in other words, the role Oliver played in the past. So, as he uses magical convergence to absorb the mana in the environment, the enchanter doesn't draw a golden energy into his blade like his former companion. But one way or another, the dragon will have to deal with the force of his black sword. When the monster fires a fireball, Orhan responds with Divine Flash, which dissipates the flames and flies toward the creature's neck. When the power gets close enough, Orhan casts Impact and massively increases the damage, causing one of the dragon's limbs to fall to the ground, separated from its body. However, it wasn't its head as expected, it was the tail, which the flying lizard sacrificed to protect its most important limb. From that moment on, Orhan understands that this fight may not be won. But regardless of whatever reason this dragon has, he also has a reason he cannot afford to lose, and for that purpose, the boy is willing to do anything. Truth be told, both rivals are much weaker, but instead of slowing down the battle, it becomes even more intense, whether from the anger or anxiety on both sides. On the other hand, it comes at a cost, and Orhan ends up losing his buffs. Quickly, Selma Claudel tries to buff him with an attribute increase, but her magic doesn't work because Orhan himself blocks the enchantment, insisting that she focus only on protecting the rookies. This time, Selma Claudel understands she has no place in this fight, so she steps aside and leaves the way open for Orhan no matter what happens. Without holding back and ready to use every last drop of blood, the boy repeats the quintuple attribute increase to resume the offensive. Then he mixes Thunder Shock with Impact to unleash on the Black Dragon, a spell so powerful that it collapses to the ground completely. Even so, the monster rises again and still shows willingness to fight, even though it is heavily weakened, while Orhan also exhausted, cannot believe that not even this was enough to end the battle. To make matters worse, the man's blade shatters after so much constant pressure. Even so, both the human and the dragon seem to be on equal footing. Despite everything, dropping his weapon to the ground, Orhan summons a magic circle to cast the destruction spell, creating what is practically a small hurricane of shadows that forms a large black sword within it. This spell converges maximally amplified mana into the blade, and its power surpasses even that of special magic. Armed with equipment of this level, the enchanter creates a series of reflective walls to propel his own body off each one. They work like trampolines, allowing the user to confuse the enemy with his speed. With that, once he finds the right moment to strike, Orhan leaps through the air and uses weight increase to fall from the sky like a comet toward his opponent. A fireball is launched, but he cancels the flames with an impact. When the boy finally reaches his target, the collision that follows seems to create the image of a nuclear explosion. Then, when the smoke clears and reveals an exhausted but living Orhan the people exchange their anxious looks for smiles of relief, and Orhan is immediately celebrated as a hero. Meanwhile, the heroes group had just arrived near the Great Southern Labyrinth and saw a teleportation light shining. As they got closer, they found rookies gathered around, saying they had been teleported out of nowhere. A bit farther ahead, they came across the defeated Black Dragon, which left the entire team in shock. Beside the corpse stood Orhan the one responsible for bringing down the terrifying creature. Leaning on a black magical blade, he stepped away from it, and they watched it crumble in the air like sand in the wind. Worried, Luna ran toward her friend and shouted that he needed healing, but Orhan simply touched her shoulder and asked her to take care of the rest. Not understanding any of this, Luna started suspecting that he had faced the Black Dragon alone. Sharing that same thought, Derek asked Orhan if that was what happened, but ended up irritated when he was ignored. Luna demanded that the tank cut it out, because it was obvious Dura had done it. So it would be easier if the heroes group admitted their own lack of skill. Angry at the girl's boldness, Derek charged at her violently, so Luna told Pixie to handle the situation. At that moment, a blue glow flew toward the man and hit him with a debuff that stopped him from moving. When Oliver asked the two to stop, the girl released her teammate, while the team leader looked at Orhan Dura with anger. That night, in her room, Sophia began writing her mission report and planned to include a lot about her companion, the one mainly responsible for giving her the courage to use her first advanced spell, for teaching her about parallel construction, and especially for defeating the infamous Black Dragon on his own. In the middle of that, Selma dragged herself into the room with a terrible expression and collapsed onto her own bed. Seeing how exhausted her sister was, Sophia took her so they could bathe together, which left Selma much more relaxed. The enchantress confessed her relief at seeing her little sister safe, and the girl replied that it was all thanks to Orhan. Speaking of which, Selma asked what she thought about the fight between him and the dragon, and the girl said Orhan had shown himself to be very strong. Selma already knew that, but what she wanted to understand was how that guy was so much stronger than everyone else. Sophia said she understood the reason, which made Selma desperate to know what she meant. After asking her sister to calm down, the small mage explained that Orhan's movements and magic were incredible, but the rest seemed to be just the basics, exactly what he taught Team 10 about how backline attackers and defenders fight. Because of that, she learned a lot, but it was still impressive that he did all of that on his own. Regarding that, Selma reflected that she thought she would never understand the bottomless well of strength Dura had shown, but through her sister, she managed to get an idea because the girl understood what she saw in her own way. With that in mind, the enchantress emphasized how amazing her sister was, while saying she herself was the opposite. Seeing Selma downcast, the younger girl hugged her warmly and mentioned how much she respected the fact that her sister always walked on her own 2 feet and was so reliable to so many people. One day, Sophia wanted to be just like her older sister. Hours later, Orhan woke up in his bed with unbearable pain in his arm, so he used a pain relief spell to hold it back. Since it was already noon, he thought about how sore and tired his body was because of yesterday's fight after all. He had reached his limit, and it was pure luck he didn't suffer worse side effects after using so much magic. Looking out the window, he saw Selma, who came upstairs to invite him for tea. At the table, she apologized for the inconvenience, but said she just wanted to know how her partner was doing. Forcing a pleasant expression, he said he was perfectly fine and thanked her for coming. Then Selma stood up and bowed to say that thanks to Orhan, they completed the expedition without losing anyone. Dura panicked, trying to convince her not to bow like that, since Selma was not a nobody. But she said her position didn't matter at the moment, because he had saved her and the valuable recruits. Changing the subject, Selma asked if Orhan could go to the Sky Knight Silver Rabbit's clan, since the leader wanted to meet the person responsible for the expedition's success. Then, already at the group's headquarters, Vince Briars got straight to the point and invited Orhan Dura to join them. Vince wanted him to become a frontline attacker of Unit 1, the most powerful in the organization, and also wanted to recommend Dura as a commander. Startled, the boy said he was too young. But the clan leader replied that the strength and experience he showed were more than enough, and that he was serious, polite, and hardworking, all the qualities needed to become a commander. Vince then asked if Selma agreed, and she confirmed without hesitation, adding that she would love to work with Orhan to support the clan. Hearing the proposal, Orhan thought about how anyone would accept it without thinking twice, but he asked for time to think. Even with his serious demeanor, Vince Briars smiled and told him to take all the time he needed. Before he left, Vince mentioned that the Adventurers Guild also wanted to see him. After promising to stop by, the boy left the Silver Rabbit's headquarters, still unable to process that he had been invited to join such a powerful clan. Above all, he thought about how he would have companions again, though that made him remember when he was expelled from his previous group. Afterwards, he stopped by his grandfather's shop to tell him what had happened, and the old man understood his grandson's pain well enough to know that Orhan feared being used and thrown away again, just like with the heroes group. In his view, used wasn't the best word, but relying on each other and compensating for each other's weaknesses is what helps people grow. That's why he told the boy to think carefully about it. After visiting his grandfather, Orhan goes to the Adventurers Guild and feels intimidated by all the people who were gathered there with him, including every member of the heroes' party. At the other end of the table, the guild master asks if it's true that Orhan Dura defeated the Black Dragon alone, and the enchanter confirms it. Wearing a mocking expression, Derek and Annalie interrupt to say that their team had weakened the dragon beforehand, which made things easy for him. Orhan tells the two of them to be quiet since they had nothing to do with it, and Derek shoots up from his chair in anger, but Luna asks him to calm down. Then Orhan asks Oliver whether the heroes' party went straight to the 92nd floor with their new enchanter because they assumed it would be easy after going there so many times. When Oliver makes an angry face and stays silent, Dura assumes that's exactly what happened. He reinforces that, as he had already said, the smartest thing would have been to move forward only when everyone was stronger, since many people had already died in the deeper floors. In response, Oliver says that's the reason they changed enchanters. He assumed they could continue with someone who had stronger support magic than Orhan. Orhan replies that he isn't angry about being removed from the heroes' party, but about seeing how lightly their leader treats enchanters. Oliver denies it and argues that he values the class so much that he invited another one. If that's the case, Dura asks why he started from the deepest floors, since Oliver should know how much concentration an enchanter needs during exploration. Oliver answers that all an enchanter does is sit in a safe spot and reapply buffs when they run out. Fed up with that nonsense, Orhan stands and states the exact duration of the hero's party's buff. He explains that an enchanter has to keep track of that timing in order to know when to reapply it, while also giving instructions to the team. Then he asks Oliver which part of that seems easy. Meanwhile, Team 10 walks together down the corridor of the Silver Rabbit's headquarters, worried about what Orhan might be doing now, remembering they didn't even have the chance to talk to him again after the expedition. After everything that happened, the three of them had become great admirers of the enchanter, and they would love for him to become a member of the Night Sky Silver Rabbits. Not wanting to lose the opportunity, they decide to ask him themselves. So they go after Selma to see if she knows where the instructor is. Speaking of the enchanter, she is sitting on a bench in the garden, practicing how she should invite Orhan to the clan, repeating to herself several different ways of saying what needs to be said, even though she suspects he won't want companions again after the trauma he suffered in the hero's party. Besides, as he made clear in the battle against the Black Dragon when he dismissed her buff, Orhan doesn't need Selma and is far more powerful than she is. The three children arrive at that moment and ask the enchanter if she knows where Orhan Dura lives, because they want to ask him to join the clan. Selma admits she would also like that, but says he doesn't need them. On the contrary, they only get in the way of someone at his level. Logan counters that everyone already knows that, but he personally still wants Orhan in the clan, since that's the only way he could learn from him up close. Caroline fully agrees and can already picture herself becoming stronger just by imagining it, while Sophia would love for their former companion to spend more time with them again. According to Logan, maybe they're weak today and maybe they do get in Orhan's way, but one day they'll be stronger and could be accepted as his companions in the future. Hearing the kids, Selma realizes she could learn more from him too and become stronger. So she admits she was being too hard on herself and tells them Orhan Dura is at the Adventurers Guild. They sprint off immediately. Speaking of that, Orhan leaves the guild after that heavy meeting, while the ones who stayed begin discussing the penalty for the forced teleport, tired and eager to take a nap. The enchanter sees the kids running toward him and immediately darts into the maze of alleys between the city's houses. But running is difficult because of the physical injuries he suffered in yesterday's fight. Hearing the three of them getting closer, he conjures magical platforms that work as stairs, climbs them, and reaches the roof of a small building, successfully shaking the kids off. When he enters his grandfather's shop in the late afternoon, Orhan can still hear the three children outside, but he leaves them be. His grandfather asks why he's avoiding the kids, and Orhan says he has decided he won't join another group, which is why he didn't want to make them sad with the news. The old man laughs at how much his grandson clearly cares about those children. Out in the street, Team 10 starts to suspect that Orhan is running from them because he doesn't want to join the Silver Rabbits. Logan and Caroline even say they'll leave the clan if that's what it takes to become his apprentices, but Sophia doesn't want their goodbye to be like this. Inside the shop, the grandfather comments that his grandson looked like he was having fun when he ran in, and that those kids seemed to like him a lot. The old man understands that Orhan is just looking for a place he can call his own, but he teaches him that he doesn't have to stay in that place alone. He can find a new path with the help of others. At nightfall, Orhan walks across the fields, thinking about what he heard from his grandfather, until Sophia suddenly appears to thank him for saving everyone yesterday. She asks where he's been, since she and her friends spent the whole afternoon looking for him, and he dodges the question by asking what she's doing out there at this hour. Sophia replies that this is one of her favorite places, and that she comes here from time to time because it's close to the clan's headquarters. As she looks up at the sky, the girl comments that even in the darkest places, the moon keeps shining brightly, and she feels as if she gains some sort of strength whenever she looks at it. By the way, Sophia explains where the name Silver Rabbits of the Night Sky comes from. According to her, the moon is also called the Night's Guide, meaning the purpose of the Silver Rabbits is to become guides for adventurers. When he hears that, Orhan Dura feels as though he talked about something like this with someone a long time ago, and an image of a girl fills his mind. In the midst of that sensation, Sophia gets straight to the point and asks Orhan to join her clan. The man asks what kind of place the clan is for her, and Sophia answers that they taught her many things and gave her countless smiles, and that she's proud to say the Silver Rabbit is her home. Her words make Orhan remember the conversation he had with his grandfather about finding a place he could call his own. And so the two of them fall into thought as they look at the moon again. A day later, the enchanter goes to the headquarters of the Silver Rabbits of the Night Sky and tells Vince about his decision to join the clan. Right then, Selma walks into the room to congratulate their new companion and hand him his uniform. Soon after, Orhan leaves the headquarters fully dressed in the clan's uniform and runs into the children who had been rushing around trying to find their former instructor, and they are amazed when they see him wearing the clan's outfit. Next, we see Orhan and Oliver in a wooden sword duel from many years ago, when they were still children. Despite their balance and skill, the blonde boy gained the advantage and managed to disarm his opponent, declaring his victory. Because of this, the men watching the fight commented among themselves that only Oliver could fulfill their wish, but that the young prodigy could at least protect the hero. Meanwhile, not taking the fight very seriously, Orhan casually said that he lost. But Oliver refused to accept his partner's defeatist attitude, as he believed Orhan could do much better than that. Orhan, however, insisted that that had been his full strength, and even though people used to say he was more skilled when he was younger, the truth was that Oliver had grown and surpassed him, so there was nothing to be done. Still, Oliver wanted his friend to treat the duel seriously and wasn't convinced to just leave things as they were. When he left, Orhan Dura reflected alone on how he didn't want to kill his companion. Suddenly, a little girl named Sion appeared, smiling as she lamented that her friend had been defeated. Orhan grew worried that she had seen his pathetic side, but Sion believed he had been amazing. Besides, she knew his true strength. Even so, Orhan lowered his head and admitted that he was growing weaker by the day, all because of his frail heart, which couldn't handle his own power, nor the way adults looked at him. Because of that, it was now his friend Oliver who had to carry that burden, and that made young Dura feel awful. Hearing this, Sion puffed out her chest and swore she wouldn't let him be alone in this, and that she would become strong enough to stand by his side, because they needed to defeat something that still hadn't been revealed, reminding him that she was the same as Orhan in some way that also hadn't been explained yet. Perhaps due to this similarity, Sion trusted the boy deeply and was willing to follow him to the ends of the world, since she didn't want him to carry that weight alone. With that promise, Sion said that on the day she became strong enough to accompany Orhan, the two of them would be able to walk together to a certain place not yet specified. After that, we see the Grandmaster receiving a visit from the Guild Master of the southern region of the continent, who, in a rush, tells him that 3 days earlier an adventurer defeated the Black Dragon alone in an area under his jurisdiction. Pleased, the Grandmaster believes this should finally speed up the conquest of the Southern Labyrinth, but he also remarks that anyone who would face the dragon alone must be completely insane. The Guild Master responds that the adventurer simply reacted to an emergency, since the flying beast appeared outside its natural habitat, the boss chamber on the 92nd floor. The Grandmaster assumes this is due to the disappearance of the West, and asks whether Oliver was the one who killed the dragon. Receiving a no, he then assumes it was Orhan Dura, which turns out to be correct. This concerns the noble, because if Orhan had the conditions to unleash that much power, he would never choose to defeat one of the deep floor bosses. Even so, the Grandmaster hopes that perhaps the man hasn't returned to his original state, so he might have found some other way to defeat the Black Dragon. Regardless, he asks the Guild Master to report immediately if anything happens to Orhan Dura. The next day, deep within a forest, a group of adventurers exterminates a pile of enemies with ease. One of the women finds it curious that 5 high-level groups are working together, and a colleague replies that, in the end, the result was the same. A boy then asks Sion what they should do, and after assessing that strong adventurers likely won't appear there in the Great Eastern Labyrinth for a while, She decides it would be best for them to leave. She then orders whoever was hiding to show themselves, and one of Sion's messengers appears magically to deliver a message from headquarters. An adventurer strong enough to defeat the Black Dragon alone has appeared in the south, and this target should be eliminated if Sion's group determines he is an enemy. The messenger explains that, according to HQ, this adventurer is probably already allied with the church. Due to the lack of precise details, Sion believes the target is not Oliver. Therefore, she decides that her team will depart for the Great Southern Labyrinth as soon as everyone is ready. A boy from the team comments that the South, just like the East, is church territory, meaning they must be twice as careful, especially given the strength of this adventurer. Sion reflects that perhaps someone like her has finally emerged in the South, and that she didn't want to get involved in that region. But she is the only one capable of handling the situation. If that truly is what's happening, the South might be conquered as quickly as the West, and Sion must prevent that at all costs. After all, she swore to follow Orhan's will after he died, and that feeling has never changed since he was the person she loved the most. Sion has never forgotten the day she received the message of his death, the moment her heart froze. Yet even now, alone, she will continue fighting and won't let anyone stand in her way, pushing forward until she kills the elders of the church who led Orhan to his death. Speaking of Orhan Dura, he is praised by the leader of the Silver Rabbits during a clan meeting for risking his life to protect his companions during the expedition, facing that terrifying dragon. Vince Biars adds that Orhan is not only physically strong, but was also solely responsible for the management and operations of the Heroes group. For that reason, the young man is being promoted at this moment to commander of the Night Sky Silver Rabbits, taking the position once held by Albert, who died fighting the Black Dragon in the past. Selma Claudel's hands tremble just hearing the name of her former companion, while Vince reminds everyone that the promotion must be approved by at least 2/3 of the current commanders, then opens the vote. However, a man seated at the table asks to speak before the voting begins. Once permission is granted, he talks about how the newcomer has shown great potential and is a recommendation from the leader himself. But he questions whether Dura is willing to give his life for the clan, because once he becomes commander, his actions will change the lives of many members, and for those who belong to this organization, it means everything. So they must be certain that the new commander has the same level of understanding about this matter. In response, Orhan understands the man's feeling, but when he remembers the brutal tragedy he lived through in his childhood and the oath he could never break, he decides that he will not do that. So he answers that he is not willing to give his life for the clan. Indignant, another person present points out that this statement not only disqualifies Dura as commander, but also as a member of the organization. The first man wants to know what the boy is even doing there, and he answers that he wants to protect the people he cares about and has been prepared for that ever since he accepted joining the group. Those people he will protect, even if he has to give his life to keep them safe, including every member of the Silver Rabbits. This answer convinces those who were doubtful about the newcomer's loyalty, and with the situation calmer, Vince Biars begins the voting. As they leave the meeting, Selma Claudel admits that Orhan gave her a scare, and he says that this is just how he is. Either way, she is taking her friend right now to meet the people from Unit 1, where everyone is eager to meet him. At that moment, a girl approaches the pair to speak with Orhan. Selma introduces her as Estella, from the management division, hoping the new commander will be able to teach people. She asks for a little help with a new group that needs training, knowing her friend can do it. Selma joins Estella in reinforcing the request. He asks whether this won't interfere with the matter regarding Unit 1, but Selma assures him everything is fine, because now he will have more time than when he was in the hero group, since the Silver Rabbits don't spend consecutive days in dungeons. In fact, Estella reminds them that it is forbidden to stay for more than 3 days, and Orhan is impressed with the working conditions the place provides, so he accepts the challenge. Grateful, Estella promises to send the materials soon and leaves. Next, Selma takes the commander to Unit 1, and he is welcomed like a true dragon slayer. Judging by the appearance of the members of this team, he cannot understand how they can be the strongest unit in the clan. The oldest of the group, at 24 years old, introduces herself as Rain Hugwell, a sorceress who sees herself as the newcomer's big sister and asks him to come to her if he needs anything. Thinking the boy was staring at her chest, she covers her body with her arms and asks if he thought they were small. Orhan answers that they are quite large, the robes she is wearing. He meant, after her, Lucretia Otis introduces herself, an 18-year-old healer who asks to be called Luker. Then she points out that it is time for irresponsible Will to introduce himself. Annoyed with the girl, Wilk Savory says he is the team's defender and can be called Will. Next, Selma Claudel introduces herself again just to follow protocol, identifying herself as an enchanter and leader of the team. Lastly, Orhun Dura states his name to everyone, says he is 18 years old and a frontline attacker, and hopes he can do his best to reach the level of his teammates. Will jokes that he had been taking Albert's role until now, so he wishes good luck to the guy who will take his place. Realizing the newcomer is being overly formal, Selma tells him he doesn't have to be like that. Orhun doesn't understand why, so Luker explains that everyone is roughly the same age, and she herself doesn't speak formally, so it's all fine. Changing the subject, Will is dying to know how on earth this guy defeated the Black Dragon. Orhun hesitates, so Selma says he doesn't need to talk if he doesn't want to, but he decides it's important to share this kind of information with his teammates. So Orhun Dura explains that he managed to bring the beast down largely thanks to 2 original spells. The first is Impact, capable of increasing the effect of a piece of equipment or magic by up to 100 times. The second is a spell that can be used multiple times to increase abilities beyond what ordinary support magic can do. For example, against the dragon, he used it 32 times. Luker and Rain are stunned by his statement, and he explains that the downside is that it can only be used on himself, and the buff is so strong that his body cannot endure it for long. Since the fight against the Black Dragon took quite a while, Orhun came out of it badly hurt. Luker asks whether the newcomer could also take other positions since he is so strong, and he admits that no matter how much he tries, he can only use mid-level spells, even though he can create original magic. He has no idea why, but it certainly bothers him a lot. Even so, although he cannot use advanced powers, his original spells have helped him out beautifully, so it's not as if he is useless. Hearing that, Rain acknowledges the newcomer's effort and comments that she hopes one day to be able to use the highest level spells as well. Luker asks if the boy has any special abilities, and he says yes. With that, Will points out that there are now 3 members in the group with special abilities. But Selma thinks it's better for Orhun to see that in practice during an expedition she is organizing for tomorrow to the Great Southern Labyrinth, to help the team get in sync with the new member. Speaking of that, Will thinks it's a good idea to throw a welcome party for their new teammate, and Selma agrees completely. While scratching his head as he talks about the expedition, Orhun admits that he ended up losing his weapon in the fight against the dragon, so he'll have to buy another one if he wants to keep exploring. This worries his colleagues, since Orhun Dura usually takes days to get new equipment, but he assures them he's fine. Because his weapon is standardized, he can just buy another one. That information makes his companions even more alarmed, because they were convinced that someone with his level of power would have an incredible, custom-made weapon. But Orhun says his equipment had been doing the job so far, and that he can also use support magic to strengthen the blade and things like that. After everything that's been said, Rain stands up and states that from today on, Orhun Dura is an ace of the Silver Rabbits, so he can't be seen around with a cheap store-bought trinket. Speaking of which, when Unit 1 goes down to see Aaron, the blacksmith, and tells him that the Dragon Slayer was using a standardized weapon, the man is horrified and surprised that the kid survived for so long. Embarrassed, the boy explains that he was a spellcaster for a long time on the battlefield, so his weapon wasn't that important. But when Rain got mad at him, Orhun understood that now that he's part of Unit 1, he needs equipment worthy of his position. For that reason, Orhun Dura asks Aaron to forge a sword for him. Will comments that Aaron is not only the exclusive blacksmith of the Silver Rabbits, but also the best there is, so the quality will be amazing. The craftsman thanks him for the compliment, but reminds them there's one issue. To forge a high-level weapon, the materials must come from the deeper floors of the Great Labyrinth. Since that's the case, Orhun Dura uses his inventory and drops a great amount of those materials onto the counter, leaving everyone stunned. Selma asks why this guy has all that, and he says he had stored it away since his time in the hero's party but never used it for anything. Delighted by the griffin claws and manticore fangs, Luker then lays eyes on a black dragon scale and goes into shock along with the rest of the group. Orhun realizes that they are certainly traumatized because one of their companions died to that creature. So feeling guilty for exposing that wound, he apologizes. But Rain actually says that with that scale, it will be possible to make an impressive weapon. Orhun assumes she's just covering up her sadness, while Aaron announces that he will use this material as the main ingredient for the weapon and wants to know what else the client wants to include. Orhan worries that their meeting with the blacksmith will take too long and leave them without time for the party they were planning. But his teammates are all understanding and want their partner to commission the best sword he can. The next day, a meeting begins among the members of Unit 1. Orhan is deep in thought about finally being able to explore dungeons with companions again. And because of that, he feels a bit insecure, wondering whether he'll be able to meet the expectations the others have of him. Opening the meeting, Selma informs them that the Adventure Management Division requested the collection of toxic sheep hides, so the group will head to the 86th floor. Distracted in the middle of her explanation, Orhan thinks about taking these companions to the 94th floor so they can be on equal footing with the hero's party. Eventually, Unit 1 gathers in the area surrounding the dungeon to begin the incursion. The beautiful scenery distracts some of the members to the point that they relax and, for a moment, think the upcoming challenge isn't as dangerous as it seems. Noticing this, Selma asks everyone not to lower their guard, because even though their targets are the toxic sheep, many earth dragons roam the area. Still, she reminds them that the main objective is to see how the team works together with Orhan, who is joining the most important Silver Rabbits unit in combat for the first time. As for strategy, the leader decides that will draw the monster's attention. Rain will attack from behind with magic, and Lucre will do the same while keeping healing spells ready for when they're needed. Selma will personally maintain the group's buffs and give instructions. And finally, Orhan Dura will take the offensive lead. The companions comment that Orhan could easily defeat all the enemies by himself, and Selma adds that there's no problem if he prefers to fight without help. However, the newcomer says he is part of the group and will take orders like everyone else. Lucre even points out that the team won't learn to work together with him if he fights alone, so the leader apologizes, embarrassed, since the attitude she showed isn't normal for her at all. In the middle of this, a fireball approaches the group at high speed, until Orhan casts a magic shield that absorbs the attack. At that moment, he understands that the flames must have come from an earth dragon, and since he doesn't see the monster anywhere, he advises them to locate it before anything else, because she has magic tracking. Lucre moves to the front. Orhan doesn't know what spell that is, so Selma explains that it's her main ability, allowing Lucre to follow magical traces to find the target. When she finds the dragon, the healer casts Flash to attract the opponent, forcing it into the open where it becomes visible to everyone. Now, Will advances toward the monster, while Selma asks Orhan to watch Unit 1's power with his own eyes. She tells Rain to prepare her attack while casting a magic boost on her. Will gets close to the dragon and dissipates several fireballs with his weapon while keeping some distance. Since it's Orhan Dura's first time with the group, Rain prepares her best fireworks to celebrate the occasion. She then casts Explosion, forming a source of heat under the earth dragon's feet and, immediately after, triggering a powerful blast that finishes the creature. Impressed, Orhan praises the teamwork of Unit 1 and the speed with which they resolved the fight. Thinking about the battle on his own, he considers how incredible it was that Will canceled the enemy's attack instead of simply blocking it, especially with that dual blade almost no one uses. Beyond that, Rain's quick casting of Explosion was remarkable, since most mages would need twice as much time to cast the spell. And of course, Lucre's tracking was extremely precise and important, since the hardest part of any expedition is finding the monsters. In Orhan's opinion, Selma's leadership ability is what binds everything together, making Unit 1 an ideal group. At that moment, to put the team's abilities to an even greater test, 2 more Earth Dragons appear, and now Orhan Dura is placed into action alongside Will on the front line. To the surprise of the other members, the newcomer stops running, turns his body, and fires a stone arrow at a spot that seemed random, but in reality, it was hitting an armored turtle camouflaged behind the women of the group. With this reveal, the Silver Rabbits find themselves surrounded. Selma recognizes that the turtle's shell is tough, but the creature is slow, so she orders Rain and Lucre to take care of it while Will and Dura face the Earth Dragons without worrying about the rear. Hearing this, Orhan notices how quickly the leader thinks and gives orders, which shows she can be trusted in a real battle. As the dragons launch fireballs, Will steps forward to dissipate the flames. Using telepathy, her special ability that allows long-distance communication, Selma tells Orhan to attack from the side to hit the monster's blind spots, and that he can use his own buffs if he wants. Impressed by the leader's special ability, Orhan finally feels like he is part of a real team after being humiliated for so long in the hero's party. Moving to the flank of the dragons, he casts enhancement spells on himself to increase his strength, technique, and sharpness. When he's ready, Selma orders him to attack, and the boy uses impact to cut off the monsters' heads. On the other side of the battlefield, Rain casts Emurlnir, while Lucre uses Ice Lance, combining lightning, ice, and fire in a fatal sequence that annihilates the armored turtle. After the victory, Unit 1 continues toward the mission site, and Orhan Dura remarks how long it had been since he fought with such ease, thanks to the incredible teamwork his partners possess. He even states that his new companions are much more involved and united than those from the hero's party, which makes him truly happy to be joining the team. Since they had just been praised, the other members follow along and point out how well Orhan handled the impact, because, truth be told, very few people can cut off the heads of 2 earth dragons at the same time. Selma then asks whether Orhan thinks they're ready for the 92nd floor, and he says yes, but not just because he joined Unit 1. In the rookie's opinion, this group could even defeat the Black Dragon without needing his help. Relieved, Rain says they trained a lot over the past year to reach this level, and the memory of all that effort makes the girl emotional. Still, Will points out that hearing such words from a dragon slayer himself makes them believe in their own abilities. Orhan reflects that these people trained extremely hard after Albert's death, and that this dedication raised their level to the point where they can now face very powerful enemies. Even so, Selma stays grounded by reminding them how powerful the Black Dragon really was, something she saw with her own eyes during that tense moment of the expedition. Clearly traumatized, she insists she doesn't want to lose anyone else, and that's why she bows slightly as she asks Orhan Dura to help them. In return, the boy reaffirms that he is part of Unit 1, and he recalls his oath to protect his companions until the end at all costs, even if it means fighting the Black Dragon, which has long been a dream of this team. With those words, the entire group feels more united and certain that they are on the right path. Speaking of paths, Unit 1 continues toward the dungeon to hunt the toxic sheep. Hours later, with the sun already setting, they leave the cave after killing 9 of those animals. Orhan does a great job collecting the skins and is praised by Selma, so he takes the chance to mention that tomorrow he needs to go to the Adventure Management Division, but he doesn't know the way. The leader of the group, who turned red every time the man spoke to her, finds the perfect moment to offer herself as a guide for the rookie, so they agree to go together the next day. However, the day was far from over, since they hadn't been able to celebrate the arrival of the new member properly the night before. The night was still young. The 5 gather at a tavern to quench their thirst in one big gulp, and the group's enchantress highlights how satisfied all the companions are to have Orhan Dura by their side, especially because, after defeating the Black Dragon, he naturally became highly sought after by every adventurer team. Unit 1 even feels like they need to give their very best, so the guy won't regret joining them, but based on the incredible experience he had fighting alongside them, he makes it clear that leaving his new friends hasn't even crossed his mind. Lucre gets so emotional about how easy Orhan is to deal with that she starts crying. She had been afraid he might be one of those unbearable, stuck-up types. Will and Rain take the chance to confess they had the same worry, but all 3 point at Selma as the one who was most anxious to know what the rookie was really like, since she'd been pretty interested in him for quite some time. The redhead tries to deny it, but her companions don't let it go and leave the poor woman with nowhere to hide, though she argues she only wanted, as leader, to make the young man feel comfortable when joining the unit. Even so, when Orhan comments that she's an excellent leader, the woman can't handle it and downs her entire mug in one go. While everyone laughs, the rookie remembers the day his grandfather told him that every decision in life brings regret, but Orhan doesn't feel even a little regret for joining this clan. On the other hand, the person who might be regretting something now is Selma, because that mug she emptied left her absolutely wasted to the point of even commenting on how handsome Orhan is. Not only that, but she crosses the line and presses herself against the boy's chest, while he couldn't help noticing the same part of her body. However, like a true gentleman, he points out that the girl is completely drunk, hinting that maybe this isn't the right moment for any physical involvement, but the woman simply refuses to let go. Rain comes to the other side of the boy, so he asks for her help to stop the leader, but the sorceress not only refuses, she joins the enchantress and grabs the young man's left arm, leaving him surrounded by 2 terribly drunk girls. As a last attempt, Orhan begs Will and Lucre to save him, but the 2 pretend not to see anything and promise only that they won't look at the atrocity that is about to happen, whatever it might be. At that point, The brave hero was almost giving in to the temptation of feeling that warm, seductive comfort from the girls, but before completely surrendering to pleasure, he plays his final card, the sleep induction spell. After putting the girls to sleep, he silently thanks Selma for such a fun day. Speaking of the beautiful redhead lying in her bed, Sophia is worried about how long her sister is taking to return from the labyrinth with Orhan. Finally, someone knocks on the door, but instead of Selma, it's Orhan Dura's voice on the other side. Sophia loses her mind at the surprise and even starts thinking the guy came in the middle of the night just to see her. But when she opens the door, she gets even more startled. Her sister is being carried on his back. Not knowing how to react, the girl asks since when the two of them have that kind of relationship. Dura quickly explains that there's nothing going on between them. Selma simply drank too much and needed a little help getting home. Sophia knows her sister was never the type to drink a lot, but seeing her still conscious and rubbing her face against him makes it clear that tonight must have been quite the experience. With that, the child wakes her older sister to talk with her about what really happened. After hearing that Selma drank too much at Orhan's welcome party, Sophia says that the boy left with a smile on his face, but that Selma probably bothered him. Even so, the little girl acknowledges that Selma has been too busy and stressed lately, and that maybe Orhan's arrival is exactly what will help her have less work. Besides, even though her sister apologized, the girl doesn't think Selma has anything to be forgiven for. Because even though she did get upset, she doesn't think it's fair to fight with her sister over those feelings. In the end, all Sophia asks is that Selma be more careful from now on. Hearing such mature and understanding words from a child, the adult in the situation starts seeing the little one as a heaven-sent angel, which amuses the girl. Shortly after, Selma notices how much more Sophia has been smiling than she used to, and she's sure it's thanks to Orhan. After the conversation, while taking a shower, Selma thinks about how much work the man must have had carrying her all the way to her house, and how deeply embarrassing it was not only at the tavern, but especially in front of her younger sister. So she needs to be careful not to act like that again and make the girl misunderstand everything once more. At the same time, she wonders whether Sophia might be developing some sort of extra feeling for Orhan, judging by the way she talks about him and everything else. However, the truth may be that Selma herself is the one with that feeling, and she has been doing everything she can to reject it, something that became very clear when everyone in the tavern said those things about her liking the boy. In other words, Selma tried her hardest to hide what she really felt, and she had been doing that relatively well until now. But it becomes difficult to keep running from it after the scene at the tavern. At daybreak, the two meet again to head to the Adventure Management Division. When she runs into Orhan, Selma apologizes for yesterday, but the boy understands she just drank too much and says everything is fine. So she smiles and agrees that it's time to look ahead. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.